Hey everyone, this video is about what I think the world should be like, basically. But a lot of it's unscripted, as is this right now. It goes off some notes that I've written. But if it sounds like off the dome, that's because it is. I'm trying to start a conversation. I'm not trying to dictate what everybody should believe. I hope you like my thoughts, and I am super open to feedback in the comments. Oh, hello! In this video, I'm going to be engaging with a little exercise I hope will catch on as more of a trend with leftist content creators. See, you might be aware a little while ago, fellow demonic intelligence asset Thought Slime released a video called Slime World, and in it she talked about the kind of world she'd like to live in. She also urged viewers and other content creators to talk about the world they'd like to live in as well. So, here we are. Now, myself, being an alien from the planet Mars, I don't need to deal in such hypotheticals. I'm just going to tell you how cool Martian communism is, and therefore, why I'm here to reproduce it on Earth. That's right, kids. Sophie's doing a War of the Worlds. Bad luck, bestie. Please rethink this. And I know this is going to provoke a bunch of questions like, Sophie, why can't we see the Martian society from space? That's easy. Holograms. What about the Mars rover? Okay, bit more of an embarrassing answer. For NASA, they landed the rover right in one of our national parks. Every time it gets close to the edge, someone goes in, powers it down, spins it around, and just sets it going again. And some people, I think, will object to this as utopianism, like just fantasizing about the perfect world we'll all live in when communism happens. But firstly, I think there is some value in utopianism. If we'd ever talk about the kind of world we want to live in, we can never really talk about how to get there. And also, I'm not telling you how society should definitely be, because I don't think Earth can ever be exactly like Mars. I think that there are lots of different possible perfect societies, as long as we accept that perfect is actually a pretty low bar. There are some fundamentals, like when people need food, they get food, that there are many different ways to actually achieve. But before I can really begin telling you about Mars, I need to tell you a bit about Earth. Now, again, they're very similar, and Earth is a lot like how Mars was about 100 years ago. But a lot of people watching this video have some level of understanding, but could benefit from sharing a framework if we're going to understand what's wrong with Earth now and what Mars has done to improve similar situations. For example, a lot of people watching this are sick of how cops treat people, or how people get deported by immigration services, and the apparent inhumanity of how cops and immigration officers treat people is real and valid and obvious to the human senses. But you have to understand the bigger project it's part of if you're going to understand what needs to change for it to stop. Cops, for example. A lot of people have been talking about the end of policing. In fact, I highly recommend Alex Vitale's very good book, The End of Policing. As a concept, the idea that we could go from the way we live now to basically the same but there are no cops is very appealing because of all the obvious harm that cops are doing to people. But based on the fact of how pale I am, and I'm speaking to you in English, and you're watching me on youtube.com, and also my analytics, I can see who you are statistically, you are probably living in what is called the imperial core. Okay, it's hard for you Earthlings to see, but from a telescope on Mars, it's quite easy. Let me show you. This is your walled world. This is the imperial core and the imperial periphery. Inside the world's most policed and militarized borders is only 14% of the world's population, but 73% of the world's income. Outside these borders are the majority of the world's workers, the people being affected most by climate change right now, and the people who will be affected most by it in the future. Because as David Graeber points out in Direct Action and Ethnography, the imperial periphery isn't just the outside of an imperialist project. It's not that these borders only exist to keep people out of the imperial core, but to keep them in a ghettoized, worse quality of life where they are constantly exploited for the benefit of people in the imperial core. It's really important for you to understand that poor countries aren't just poor, they're being looted constantly. Earth is a walled world. Mars is not. On Mars, everyone shares pretty much the same quality of life. And I say pretty much because obviously there are still cultural differences and people live in different ways. Some people are settled, some people are nomadic. Some people live in close, tight-knit communities. Some people choose to go and live in a cabin in the woods. But everyone has access to the basic fundamental things and doesn't have to pay anything for it. Not only do they not have to pay, but they don't have to work their entire lives to earn money to pay for it either. How does that work? Well, when things need to get done or people want to do them, they do them. The profit incentive is not actually the reason that anybody does really anything. The only thing that's significantly different in the work that gets done on Mars is that the things that don't need to be done and nobody wants to do don't get done. Okay, just a little bit more Earth history before I tell you more about Mars. Property. Private property, as in ownership of the land, not personal property, as in the clothes on your back, the furniture in your house, your soft, squishy sons. Private property is destructive as a concept, and its consequences have led to unbelievable inhumanity and cruelty throughout human history. You know, in Europe, people used to just be able to roam, use the land for whatever they wanted, live, farm, work, play, anything that they wanted to do on the common land. And then a thing happened called the enclosures. Caliban and the Witch by Silvia Federici. Good book to check out for this. It's closely tied to both the formation of capitalist patriarchy and the witch hunts. The people trying to build the bare bones of the way the world works today had to hunt down the witches because witches were women who were the center of communities, who would provide advice and counseling and medicine to people and would know the things that people needed to know to help their lives function. So they had to be destroyed so that all of those people would be alienated and could be slotted into this formulation of nuclear families and patriarchy and lords and kings. That's all very simplistic. I'm just going over the broad strokes. And this misogynist genocide was happening in Europe because the project that it was part of was private property. The enclosures, the claiming of all of the land to belong to particular people or systems of people, and then those systems went abroad to places they'd never even been before, where people were already living rich, full, complete, happy lives, and then they went over there and claimed that they owned that land too, and did unspeakable, inhuman things to them as well. In Martian history, we had something very similar as well, where indigenous Martians... Sorry, that makes it sound like there were people on Mars and then people came from elsewhere. I mean, like, there were colonizer Martians and indigenous Martians, and the colonizer Martians went to a different part of Mars and said, this part's ours, and it wasn't. The first interplanetary colonialism is me right now with my plan for world domination by telling people my ideas and hoping that they think they're cool. But on Mars, when we started giving indigenous Martians their land back, and we also started giving common people a common access to all land and reversed the enclosures, that was one of the biggest steps towards a better society that we took, because we were fighting the concept of private property. At the same time, in cities, the concept of private property was challenged by the right to housing. People need places to live, and they shouldn't have to work themselves to death to afford a place to live. I don't know how many Earthlings are aware of tenants unions, like people working together as renters. They can resist evictions, they can do rent strikes. Or how many people are aware of squatting, or as it's legally called, adverse possession. But all of this was a huge blow to the concept of private property when people, dissatisfied with the way things were and no longer responding to the capitalist threat, work or starve, said, I live here, and I have a right to live here, and I may not have a piece of paper that says I own this house, but I also don't expect to ever earn enough in my entire life to get the piece of paper that says I own the house. But I live where I live, and I have a right to live where I live. And that was the adverse possession of cities. This is how autonomous zones and communes formed in many Martian cities. So between the reversal of the enclosures and the adverse possession of cities, that was a lot of the progress towards abolishing private property on Mars. And then there was what author Naomi Klein would describe today as blockadia. See, on Mars back then, as on Earth right now, capitalist systems were hurting people. They were hurting the planet. They were hurting wildlife. And people had had enough, and they started resisting them. Not just protesting them, but as Andreas Mal makes a distinction in his excellent book that will get you put on a list, How to Blow Up a Pipeline, resisting. Resisting, as opposed to protesting, is when people actually put themselves on the line, put their bodies in the way, or sabotage the systems that are hurting them. One such example of this are so-called climate camps, where people are blockading the access to oil pipelines and refineries right now. When people talk about blockadia, they're talking about the growth of a revolutionary society out of these climate camps. People who are resisting these systems and at the same time living in the way that they want to live in the future, sharing things, acting as a community, living communally. And on Mars, that was the third biggest factor. Autonomous zones, communes, public land, and blockadia spread across Mars. It wasn't a worldwide revolution led by a vanguard party who imposed their perfect design for society from the top down on everyone, but rather, like so many spreading mycelial networks joining together and blooming into fantastical fruits, the revolutionary society emerged together as a patchwork. And that's how we get Martian society today. But I still can't quite tell you about how it works. Because first, I need to say, money is bullshit. I've tried to allude to this already throughout the video, but money is a really fucking bad concept. All the smartest people are saying it, and they have been saying it for a long time, and if you want a really, 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 really thorough explainer of why, check out Debt the First 5,000 Years by your boy, David Graeber. Get in the grave from beyond the grave, 24/7. I am a Graeber stan girl. I will not apologize. Money as a system for organizing the world, or more importantly, debt as a system for organizing the world, has led us to practically all of the problems we face today. Debt is the chain that binds the world. Debt creates the division that forms the walled world on Earth, and being free of the concept of debt is what gave us Martian society as it is now. No one was marching to simply abolish debt or abolish money as a concept. No one was saying our one demand is to not have promissory notes because Piotr Kropotkin, the Martian equivalent, Portborg. No one was marching under banners that said, get rid of promissory notes because alien Kropotkin said they lead to reaction. It's just something that emerged as people said, we have the things we need. We live in community with each other, and it would be inhuman and cruel for us to not share those things. This is how human beings have lived for thousands and thousands of years. It's how Martians live now. And it is how human beings could live again. But I return to my earlier imaginary devil's advocate commenter telling me that if people don't have money, they won't be incentivized to do anything. So, in describing how Martian society works, I may as well begin with labor. Under capitalism, part of the workforce has to be in enforced idleness, while another part is working way too hard. We've all lived through the pandemic, right? We've all seen that the labor required to keep society ticking over is not as much labor as is usually done. We've seen who the essential workers are, and it's not everyone, is it? It's not even most people. And if we split that reproductive labor to keep society ticking over between everyone, or just everyone who could, or even just everyone who wanted to, everyone would have way more free time. right? Now, it might not divide so cleanly or simply. You can't just take labor and just slice it up like a pie. But there has to be a better arrangement than keeping some people perpetually miserable, treated like their unemployment is a personal failing when actually it's a feature and not a bug of the system, while other people are working themselves to death constantly, many of whom are aware that they're in bullshit jobs. Aaron Benanav in Automation and the Future of Work talks about how automation relates to the workforce and the amount of labor being done, and offers quite a few very interesting revelations. Many people talk about automation as a pathway toward fully automated luxury gay space communism. As you can tell, I'm a fan. However, automation in practice, many people are aware, doesn't result in that. Lots of people fearmonger that when jobs are replaced by machines, people are simply laid off and made unemployed, rather than getting to enjoy their free time. The truth, as Benanav points out, is that rather than unemployment, automation usually results in chronic underemployment. People still have to work the same job, but a machine is taking away a certain amount of their work hours, and so they aren't earning enough money to live anymore. Hey, editing Sophie here. A couple of days later, in the recording, I ranted for about an hour about the shift of the manufacturing sector to the global south and its economic effects and how it defines current politics, and none of that was relevant at all to what I was trying to say here, so it's no longer in, and it's been cut. Maybe I'll talk about that some other time. On with the video! On Mars, we actually do use automation, mass production, and machinery to make a lot more free time for everyone. There is a lot less labor to be done because the automation is deployed in a way that actually creates free time for people and reduces labor, rather than just forcing people out of stable jobs, making them do bullshit jobs instead, or making them trapped and miserable in the jobs they already have. In fact, on Mars, we barely have jobs at all. I said barely, not at all, and I'll get back to that, but most people spend most of their time being around other people, engaging with their local community. Yes, when there are things that need to get done, they do them, but as the Martian equivalents of Marx and Engels once wrote, one can harvest the ionosphere in the morning, stream to cyberspace in the afternoon, and enjoy a reclining pod at night without ever once being a professional ionosphere harvester, cyberspace streamer, or pod recliner. In fact, on Mars, people's access to the basic things that they need are organized in what I'm calling big systems and small systems. See, without the profit incentive to make any kind of incorporated body as large as possible for profit, things can just be as big as they need to be. If you're going to go see a doctor to get a diagnosis and be recommended a course of treatment, then you want a doctor who is trained to a certain standard. You want there to be an academic body researching medicines and new diseases. You want doctors to be trained by other doctors to some sort of standardized level. You want some kind of bureaucracy and administration and record keeping. But if you just cut your hand on a piece of glass, you don't want to wait for 10 hours in an emergency room before you can be seen by someone who's going to do a set of things that anyone really could do. Swab it out with some alcohol and stitch it closed. And on Mars, in people's local communities, they have a store of medical supplies and people who have responsibility to those medical supplies who are trained how to use them. And so, somebody cuts their hand open on a piece of glass or got in a tussle with a Bogdanov bear, then it's pretty easily dealt with by the local community. If someone has something they want a more long-term opinion on, a more sophisticated, trained medical opinion, they can go see a doctor. And that doctor is A, part of a big system of doctors, and B, a professional. This is what I mean. Most people on Mars don't have jobs like Earthlings understand them, but some people do. Some people choose to get involved with big systems and spend their days and ultimately their lives doing one thing. Because they like it, because they want to, because they find it to be noble or fulfilling or fun. The common earthling argument goes, what about bad jobs, hard jobs, jobs that suck? What about dealing with people's shit? And yeah, just like there's a big system of doctors, there's also a big system of water maintenance. That's because even totally well-trained, totally well-meaning independent communities need some kind of standardized system for dealing with their water purification, and their sewage. They can't just dump it all into the local waterways and nature reserves like British people would. And I know that within the water maintenance engineer big system, people rotate between different jobs. Sometimes they might be doing some engineering. Sometimes they're working on the sewage systems. Sometimes they're a pencil pusher engaging with the administrative bureaucracy. Sometimes they're planning new and interesting ways to funnel shit through pipes. But, as well as rotating between different jobs, people in that big system tend to retire earlier. And once they've retired, they have a guarantee that they can just spend their time absolutely however they want, including if they want to do nothing but drink and fucking That's a pretty popular solution for what to do about hard jobs. People get to do it for less time, or stop doing it sooner in their life. The same goes for people working in construction. People lifting and moving and hammering and the stuff men do, I don't know. They also get to retire much sooner. So this literally back-breaking work doesn't just ruin their health for the rest of their lives. And so when someone's choosing to make that their job, they're choosing to only do it for a little while. Some people still choose to do multiple jobs like this through their lives and retire several times over. Someone who's a construction worker and a water maintenance engineer and a doctor. This is another one of these capitalist myths of the jack of all trades. Like, you can't possibly learn to do multiple things really, really well. But if training and education doesn't cost anything, because on Mars, most training is vocational, you can learn to do all sorts of things. But there are definitely jobs, or at least forms of labor, that people don't think would exist on Mars when I tell them it's communist and so wonderfully utopian. Like, advertising is an interesting one. Advertising is an interesting, creative, fun, engaging project for artists and designers who want their work to be seen by thousands of people. It's just that they're not advertising competing brands in a market system. Actually, our advertisers on Mars would be very proud to say that if one of you Earthlings popped over there, you'd be able to fit in right away, because everything you need to know is on billboards and posters and so on. Imagine a 50-foot billboard that's simultaneously a beautiful, thought-provoking piece of art that's wonderful and will stick with you the rest of your life. And it's a PSA on how the bus works. What's this optical illusion at the train station? Oh, it's reminding me to go to the dentist regularly. And if I'm stretching your little Earthling minds right now with my ridiculous science fiction alien nonsense, let me tell you this has happened in communist societies on Earth as well. In the Soviet Union, people practiced advertising. Likewise, sex work is something that people always insist that if it weren't for capitalism, wouldn't exist. But I don't know how to tell you guys. I know this is a point of contention in Earth culture, so I'm trying to be as sensitive as I can about this, but people like to at least all of this sex-adjacent work, sex as performance, stripping, porn. People still do that. They're just not doing it for money because there is no money. They're doing it because they like doing it and they're good at it and want to be good at it. Porn is so much better on Mars, you guys. You have no fucking idea. And there are also people who have sex with a lot of different people. I mean, a lot of people do that. On Mars, people just kind of do what they want, and have way more free time too. So, But there are people, nonetheless, who put labor into the sex they have, put labor into being beautiful, put labor into decorating their room, put labor into practicing being good at sex. It's just not their job, because they don't have a job, and they don't do it for money, because there is no money. They're doing a thing that they want to do. Another job that people are definitely surprised when I say exists in a utopian society is lawyer. Let's talk about how Martian law works a little bit. This is going to be a bit complicated because on Earth, being a lawyer means that you're trained how to argue really well, and if you get to the top of your field, it means you can either defend human rights for free or get paid $1 billion a month to defend the crimes of the Monsanto Corporation. On Mars, lawyers work very differently. It's important to remember the big systems, small systems thing. When there's like a smashed window or a murder or something, it's a community who generally try to figure it out and reach their own justice together. I mean, they're the people who have all the facts and also the people who already live there. They're kind of the best situated to solve a crime. Forgive me, on Mars, this concept is very bizarre to us because crime was a list of wrongdoings that the ruling class held up to prove that the working class couldn't possibly govern itself without a ruling class oppressing them. And besides, ever since we've had everybody's needs met, there aren't really crimes. Sometimes people are mean, but they have a lot more time and community to figure it out and work things through with each other, and generally people find equitable solutions to everything. You just have to give people a little bit of trust and they can do incredible things. But anyway, lawyers. When two parties can't reconcile their differences, say, here's an example. One community want to build a satellite to shoot up into the Mars orbit and play beautiful blues tunes into space. Their neighboring community want to build hot rods to race across the salt flats because Martian dudes rock. Both of these projects require a lot of metal, so they're talking to the local dumps who recycle metals and therefore supply metals to people who want them for projects. The capacity isn't there for both of them, so each party ends up finding an advocate through the big system of lawyers. This costs nothing, and the advocates they're provided with are assigned randomly and definitely have the same amount of training and familiarity with the situation. If there's any kind of previous casework to be aware of, there is a bureaucracy in the legal system that keeps those records. So, both advocates can read up on that before they arrive. Then they get all the pertinent details from the communities and from anyone who wants to talk to them, and then both advocates go to a third lawyer who's called a mediator, and between them they figure it out. The mediator eventually offers a recommendation. Not a judgment, not a ruling, not a thing to be enforced. A recommendation. Both communities don't quite like it, maybe, because the mediator said, why don't you just make your projects slower according to to how much metal there is now? And the hot rod guides were like, no, we want to go fast! And the satellite people were like, no, we need our funky blues right now. And so, because both parties are still interested in the mediation process, the advocates go back and carry on discussing until the mediator makes another suggestion, and maybe another and another and another. It can go on and sometimes be lengthy and complicated, but that's because they're reaching a settlement that does not involve designating ownership or exclusive rights to anyone, but rather making a recommendation that they think will have the best chance of being successful and amenable to all parties. So in a sense, lawyers exist to enforce the law, but the law is a very different thing. See, on Earth, the law exists to protect private property. On Mars, it exists to avoid the concept of private property and to avoid the formation of the state. See, part of the reason that the big system of lawyers is necessary and full-time legal professionals exist is to mediate the big systems. If the big systems were to work in concert or were to conglomerate power too much, they could form a state, they could oppress people, and that's not what they're there for. They are there to ensure equal access for everyone into perpetuity. So, advocates are always on the side of the people, and always there to tell those big systems what they have to do. And that's the fundamental underpinning of Martian law. Systems can change to accommodate people's needs. People's needs cannot change to accommodate systems. Another really good example of this big system, small system thinking is farming and food. See, big systems and small systems on Mars are meant to create redundancy, meant to meet in the middle so that everyone's needs are covered and with an overlap. So lots of small communities will grow some of their own crops, keep some of their own livestock, but the big system exists to make sure that no one will ever go hungry, whereas the small system farming is more about what people want. At the moment on Earth, only 55% of crops that are grown are for feeding people. 36% are for feeding animals, and 9% are for feeding machines. That is, it's turned into biofuel. It's time for the big shock reveal. On Mars, the big system of farming and food doesn't farm animals. And I know this has some people kicking the fuck off, but it's really important to remember you have the planet you get, not the one you want. If I, or previous generations, could have done anything to change the climate of Mars, I'm sure that they would have. But ultimately, it became unsustainable to keep farming animals on a massive scale. And before you think we're entirely as alien as this is making us seem, we did it in part so we could keep some farmland to do inefficient things that we just want. There's this kind of bean on Mars which makes you go fast, and well, frankly, before things shifted around and society deeply changed, a lot of people on Mars were already addicted to this bean. So we weighed it up and we were like, steaks, bean. It's got to be the bean, see? Mars isn't a world entirely devoid of carnivorous diets. It's just that meat eating is not done through a system of animals bred to be killed on a massive, massive industrial scale. And remember, a lot of the formerly farmland that was used for that industry was allowed to go fallow and then was rewilded, and now are beautiful nature reserves and national parks. The big system of farming and food is there to assure that no one ever goes hungry, but it's also a very community-focused and driven system. A lot of the farms have been in people's families for generations and generations, and agricultural communities live and work together there. On Earth right now, a lot of the poorest people in the world are farmers, and they're being hit by the effects of climate change. For example, their fields are flooding. And when that happens and they make massive losses, their crops are ruined, they can't even transport what they have stored or their livestock because all of the rail lines are flooded over as well, they end up selling their land much cheaper than they should be to some rich fat cat who can afford to buy them all up. Now, it's profitable for the rich fat cat because he, and by the way, the largest owner of farmland in America is Bill Gates, because he can rotate around which farm is growing crops. One flood on one farm doesn't ruin his operation. Well, the farmers on Mars cooperativized. They all work together and do the same method that one rich fat cat owner would be doing, except they all get to keep their family farms. The workforce shift around between farms and nature does what it's doing, but to no one's particular loss. Again, you get the planet you get, not the one you want. I'm talking about our utopian society on Mars, and then I'm talking about flooding and disasters. Well, how a society responds to disasters can also be an indicator of how it works. And speaking of how societies respond to perceived problems, I feel like I should mention drugs. Yes, as in drugs, but also drugs like medicine, because they're the same thing on Mars. Recreational drugs and pharmacological drugs are produced both by the same big system of medicine that we discussed earlier, and small communities who feel like it because it's something that they're into. But that production by the medical system means that you can be sure something you're taking at a music gig is just as pure as paracetamol you need for the headache the next day. The thing is, recreational drugs on Mars are pretty available because people have so much free time and want to enjoy it. But also they're not really a problem as they're considered on Earth because people have so much free time and want to enjoy it. I don't mean to sound dismissive of this at all. Some people still sometimes have problems with substance abuse, but it's rarer. And when it happens, they have their community around to help them through it. Whereas on Earth right now, under capitalism, That's not the case. Both those suffering overwork and enforced idleness are susceptible to addiction. And on Mars, neither of those categories of people exist. There's a lot of cultural stuff I could spend a while talking about as well, but it's the stuff that's really going to stretch your earthling imaginations. Just me talking about how there isn't really bigotry, people are very accepting, people work towards common progress because it's in our culture. The 76 genders we've discovered on Mars, I really can't explain it to you without you seeing it. And the best way you could see it is to find one of those autonomous zones, some of that blockadia here on Earth. Listen to the culture of the people who are making it happen right now. But the most important thing to understand how society functions on Mars, again, is to understand something about Earth. There is enough to go around, and there always has been. Scarcity is manufactured by capitalists for profit. They hold the supply, and then they make people buy it off them, and when people can't, they go without. A system can exist that doesn't require that of people. A system can exist which moves to accommodate people's needs because people's needs cannot move to accommodate systems. And that's all I have to say for now. This is my lecture on Martian communism. Look forward to my polemics on fungus thought and bimbo power as well. If you were listening to my description of how life on Mars is, and you thought any of it was silly or unrealistic, well, firstly, it is real, so jot that down. Secondly, we Martians are very accommodating. So if you want to leave a comment telling me how you thought our society might not work so well, please do. And I'll feed it back and tell the people back on Mars how they can change. And I'm sure they will. I might even do another video later on, updating everyone on how Martian society has changed, if people have enough good suggestions. If you liked this but would like to hear me get more practical, I'm on a show every Sunday called Red Planet, where we talk about ways people are taking care of each other here and now on the planet Earth, and how those ways of taking care of each other will protect people through the crises we experience as the current system falls apart. We do episodes on things like tenants' unions and direct action against immigration raids and trans people getting HRT where they can't get it prescribed to them. And honestly, doing this show makes me hopeful. It fills me with a ton of hope because seeing people organize to get what they need and take care of each other is the most inspiring thing in the world. At the end of every episode, we like to give people a little step we kind of jokingly call the homework, but it's optional. It's just if people want to go away and do something in the real world rather than just watching our stream. On the end of the first episode, we told people they had to join any kind of union. Labor union, tenants union, disability union, unemployment union. People maybe don't know that all those other kinds of unions exist, but they do. And if you're in one, it's a great way to be plugged into the organizing scene, to be aware when things happen. If there's a general strike, you want to know about it, so you should be in a union. On one of our early episodes where we were talking about having hope and fighting doomerism, our homework was for people to go around the local area where they live and look at things that are there and think about how they would be different in a perfect world. Hey, there's a McDonald's. Would that exist in a perfect world? Well, yes. You know I love to get my McPlanton and my cheesy bites and my chicken selects. But I don't love how the workers there are always really overstressed and everyone knows that working at McDonald's is a really shitty job. And I don't like how when homeless people come in who just want some change so they can buy like one box of nuggets, the manager threatens to call the police. So I guess in a perfect world they would serve the food for free. And people who worked there would want to work there because it would be nice and just a community-centered place where they give out food to anyone who wants it. But what about that homeless guy? And there you start thinking about bigger systems and how the rest of the world could work. I don't know. Just a suggestion. You might want to try it. If you do, like I say, leave me a comment down below and tell me what you saw and what you thought about it. The reason I wanted to engage with this exercise right now, most of all, is that right now I'm working on a big project about the future. The future is a scary topic, and people tend to feel pretty bad about it. My hope is that after my next big project comes out, people who watch this channel won't feel bad about it anymore. I know, I'm promising to rid the online left of pessimism. I'm really setting a high bar for myself. So I suppose the only thing left to say is, if you're a leftist content creator watching this, I hope you'll make your own video about your perfect communist Martian utopia. You could do it unscripted like I have, off the dome. Don't worry, it's just about having a conversation. If the things you say aren't super based in dialectical materialism, that's okay. We'll work it out together. It's just about having a conversation, because if we can start talking about what kind of better worlds we'd like, we can start figuring out how to get there. A lot of people are already doing the right things we need to get there already. Out there, doing the things to make our own red planet. To make life on Earth a bit more like life on Mars.